Thanks for being here. This is the Reverie Roundtable, which we had 8 p.m. Eastern on Monday. We have a fantastic group of individuals here. Going to introduce them. It's going to be great. Before that, hey y'all, thanks for being around. If you're new to my channel, do me a favor. Hit that follow button. Hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on. We do this all the time, 6 nights a week, right? So we'd love to have you around. So hit that follow button. Also, check out our social media, right? Including our YouTube. So if you miss anything, if you're watching this on YouTube, right? Like, comment, and subscribe. Help us out a ton. Hit us up on Twitter and Discord as well. Okay, so we'll get started with, I'm very excited for this one. Eucharist. It's been so long. It's been so long. I haven't seen you. Oh, I was afraid. I don't know. Maybe something happened to you. How are you, buddy?
No, I've just been sleeping more and yelling at people on the internet less. So.
Oh fuck you. All right. A rank betrayal of this channel and everything it stands for. Okay.
True.
Eucharist. Thanks for being around. How's the child, the little kid?
She's sleeping like a baby for the time being, which means she could wake up at any time. So if I randomly go off camera, that's my excuse. But she's out. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. Next, we have Stardust. Stardust, thanks for being here. Thanks for being around. Thanks for being a part of all this. Stardust, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have one of these moments, Prime?
I think we're intent on doing that, apparently. No, for fuck's sakes. Oh, god damn it. Anyway. Stardust, thanks for being around. Moving on. We have Scott, who maybe can hear us. Well, let's see. Scott?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Scott, thank you for stopping by, for coming through. How are you?
I'm doing just fantastic. Just had a good weekend with the kids. Ready to get back into the degeneracy of Twitch.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
Oh, yeah, cool. All right. Eucharist, gotta keep up, right? Right.
The whole to talk to my wife.
Riverfall movement, yeah. Right? Gotta be
the Holy Roman Empire demands 9 children.
All right. Next, we have Stephen Bunnell. Stephen Bunnell back with us. Thanks for being so kind, showing up here, and looking so chipper and bright and happy to be here as always. How are you? Didn't even hear it. It's probably for the best. He just mumbled something at us. Still can't hear him. All right. Still muted in Discord, but that's okay. All right. Well, next we'll go to.
I love you, Prime.
I love you too. Great. Next we'll go to Doopy. Our man, our Dark Lord and Savior. Doopy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Sort of. I think I might be experiencing my first hangover like ever. I had 2 beers yesterday and I've had like a headache all fucking day. I don't think I've ever experienced a hangover before. So I'm worried that like age is hitting me. I'm 33 years old finally. So bad in some ways, good in others, I guess.
One of our mutual friends who was drinking this past Saturday also is having trouble. Apparently getting old. And
she's much older. She's like way Bo's just way older. So like that's like way older.
I wasn't talking about her, but no, yeah, take an opportunity to shit on her. That's fine. Okay. So we'll get started. Like 10 minutes in. Unbelievable. Here we go. All right. Topic 1. In the United States, the death penalty is still legal. Also, the U.S. allows prisoners to be sentenced to life sentences without the possibility of parole. Rather than facing a lifetime punishment, should we allow prisoners to opt for the death penalty? All right. Pretty simple and straightforward. We'll start with Eucharist. Give us an opening statement.
Sure. I don't know that I'll have a lot to say because I mentioned to Prime when he invited me to do this, like my own views on the death penalty, I guess, are somewhat in flux, but also something that we've fought about before in the past. Prime, as you know, that I'm strongly opposed to assisted suicide, and the option that you've presented of opting into the death penalty if you are somebody who's on death row or somebody who has a life sentence without the possibility of parole but is not on death row is to me just kind of another form of that. So that to me seems like a no-go, and we can talk about why. In general and in principle, I think I accept the possibility of the legitimacy of the death penalty, because I accept that punishments or crimes ought to be proportional, and I think there are some things that are so bad that the only proportional punishment is something like the death penalty. In practicality and in the way that it actually works in the U.S. criminal justice system, that's a whole different issue entirely. But yeah, so I'm just gonna plant my flag on no, we shouldn't let people opt into assisted suicide effectively, regardless of the length of their sentence, and then I'll argue with whatever anybody else says.
Thank you. All right, Sawdust.
Yeah. So I'll preface this with my views in general on prison and whether it should be more rehabilitative or not are still kind of up in the air. But in general, because in the U.S. we allow people to be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, I think it's fair that we allow prisoners to opt for the death penalty. I don't think it's something that should ever be like forced on somebody, but I think if somebody chooses that they want to, I think that it's their individual autonomy, and I think that they should be able to do that, especially given that we don't know what conditions they're living in, and possibly with like some preconditions with that. Obviously, like I think for us to allow it for people to opt into a death penalty, I think there would have to be like some preconditions. Maybe family members are notified. Maybe they are evaluated by a medical professional. Things like that. So to make sure there's no abuse going on. Right.
Scott, please.
Yeah, so this seems like it's an interesting question because it seems like someone has tried to devise an idea based off of making your feelings we'll feel better if we give this option without actually addressing the problem. And the problem is that we have a justice system, at least in my estimation, that is designed for retribution and vengeance, as opposed to one that is designed to keep our communities safe, to stop crime, and to give people an ability to change their lives for the better. I don't think that any human is irredeemable. And the problem here is life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then saying like, oh, well, they have the option to kill themselves. That's not an option because you're using coercion, which is the life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then you're given a choice between these two things. And somehow that's supposed to make people feel better about the situation. I think what we have to do is fundamentally dismiss with that and move to the actual crux of the problem here, which is that people are being put in prison no matter what, and they can never leave because we as a society have deemed that some crimes make these people irredeemable. And I think that's very anti-human and very anti-liberty of us.
Steven.
Whether you're for or against the death penalty, letting people opt in or out of it, I think is a bad idea. It creates a whole bunch of really crazy incentives. I can already see where like people start to measure the opt-in things for different prisons or different racial groups, and then people say it's racist, or that some prisons are just so horrible that people are opting into the death penalty anyway, and it just seems like not a good idea. If we have the death penalty, then we should reserve it for whatever crimes we decide to use it for. It shouldn't be like an opt-in. That's really silly.
Ubi.
Yeah, I'm actually very much in favor of the death penalty, and I think that if someone has already been convicted and they've been given life in prison as their sentence, it doesn't seem like there's any real benefit to society that could come from the rehabilitation at that point. So spending all this money to keep them in prison without even the option to opt out on their own and go with like an assisted suicide seems wasteful and actually kind of cruel. Because what you're in effect saying is that somebody who's dealing with the anguish, right, the mental anguish of being in prison for the rest of their lives, right? You'd rather force them to stay in that fucked up situation and to deal with that mental anguish, to punish them for a thing that they have no hope of making any kind of like real like recompense for, or penance for it. So it seems cruel not to give them the option out.
Okay, open to the panel.
So I think that a main point is that that I would like bring up in this is that we're not really like talking about the question itself is not really about like the criminal justice system itself, as it's specifically about allowing people whether they can volunteer into execution or not, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
bound
think
up
that's the question.
together, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean
I
it's
think, like,
bound up, but and while I agree with you guys on the idea that while I agree with you guys on the idea that we should like maybe look at the circumstances around this and make sure people aren't being coerced into this, like I don't feel comfortable telling somebody that if they've decided that they want to like end their lives, I don't feel comfortable telling somebody that, well, sorry, we have to wait. You have to wait, and you have to live in like a really shitty situation and be in anguish all the time, because we haven't determined whether this is like I don't know. I guess I'm having trouble wording it.
It seems like at that point you'd be saying you have to stay here because we want you to live out your sentence as punishment, right? It seems similar to that because it doesn't seem like they're waiting to like clear anything up, or if they've been convicted and this person isn't appealing, right? Then like what are they waiting for, right? It just seems like you want them there just so they can live out their sentence and die of like natural causes, I guess.
Right, but see, this is exactly the false dichotomy that I was expressing. Right, is the issue isn't whether or not we should allow people to opt in for the death penalty. The issue is that people are being sentenced with life in prison without the possibility of parole. Right, so when given the chance of you will be in a cage for the rest of your life, no matter what you do, it is lit unless you are like escaping Alcatraz or something, right? Unless you've got like a little pickaxe behind the fucking hot lady poster and you think maybe you can fucking tunnel under the prison, right? You're going to be there in a cage with other people that society is deemed to put in a cage forever, no matter what. And then you're given to the ability to choose between these two scenarios. And for some, yeah, opting in for the death penalty might seem like the better of those two choices. But the problem here is that there's literally no path to redemption for these people.
I think we
Yeah,
should be very clear because are we arguing? Because it sounds like this is about to. It sounds like we're arguing whether or not we should or shouldn't have life in prison or the death penalty, rather
Yeah.
than should we? Because that's where we're segueing into with that argument.
Yeah, I'd rather focus on the argument itself.
I mean, I am focusing on the argument by saying that that's the problem with like unless the argument hinges on, just so you know, none of you are allowed to be against the life in prison without the possibility of parole, and you must all believe in that. And it kind of handcuffs our ability to even be able to talk honestly about it.
I mean, look, I agree with you, right? A lot of this is going to be about, well, you know, if we changed up our system, our system, created a more equitable system, right? A more fairer system, that would clear up a lot of this. And I agree, that would be the case, right? And a lot of the reforms that you got in your mind, I'm for them. But in terms of the system that we have now, right? If it's going to be in place for a long time, and it probably will be, like, could we give these people this option?
I think Destiny's right that like this does create some really weird institutional incentives. Like you're adding in a choice that is gonna fundamentally change the nature of the system itself. And so you're gonna have cases where like, yeah, you're just gonna have prisons like we saw reporting recently about like the conditions currently in like Rikers or something, right? You're gonna have prisons where it's just so bad and so shitty and the guards are so awful and whatever else is going on. That yeah, you're just gonna have like wildly high rates of opting in, and that's there's an equity problem there for sure. And I don't know how you solve that.
I mean, I think
There are
bringing up
studies
Rikers. Oh, go ahead.
There was a study on the people who volunteered, death row inmates who volunteered. I believe it's 88% struggled with mental illness or substance abuse. So this is, yeah, if it's 88% of people who are struggling with like with a mental illness or substance abuse, then I'm not sure. I still think that it should be just the system that we have right now in place. I just don't think it's fair to force people to be imprisoned for life.
Well, but I mean,
And
like, if that's the punishment, like, that's the punishment, right? Like,
Right, so taking Prime at this, right, so if we're just going to take the system as it is, we've decided, at least in some states, that there are crimes that are so bad, under certain circumstances and given certain,
yeah.
evidence presented at trial, that they deserve death. And then there are other ones that just deserve life in prison. We've distinguished those two things already. So I'm just wondering, like, where, like, how you, I think the justification for those two things is different, right? The possible justification for, I think it's okay for the state to sometimes put somebody to death, and then the possible justification for, I think it's okay for the state to sometimes imprison somebody for the rest of their life, and then the possible justification for that person who's in prison for the rest of their life should then be able to choose that they want to die. Like, you could have different arguments for each of those things. I just don't know how we make those.
Yeah, so I honestly don't think that we should be forcing people to. The thing is, like, if somebody is being, if their punishment is imprisonment for the rest of their life, I'm not really sure what the point of that punishment is.
Yeah, well, I
Right.
mean, taking our
Right.
current system, because you had brought up Rikers, right? I mean, does everyone know the story of Caliph Browder? I had to look
no.
up the name real quick. So,
Yeah,
long
I
story
know him.
short, kid totally didn't steal a backpack, got accused of stealing a backpack, and he was in Rikers for over 2 years without ever going to trial. Constantly basically being forced into trial, or like, and the prosecution would just be like, oh, well, we need a delay or an extension. And by asking for a delay or an extension, even though you're not supposed to be there longer than 6 months, there's like this weird loophole where like they wouldn't count the time in between the ability to get the court date where they would ask for the extension, et cetera, right? So he did 2 years in Rikers for a crime he didn't commit, never got his day in court, and eventually they just let the kid go. And after spending 2 years in Rikers, he developed depression so bad that he committed suicide out of prison. Right. So imagine the scenario, like the idea that it's like, oh, well, these people can opt in for suicide. It's like, this is what Rikers did to someone in 2 years who had a constant kind of source of hope. Right. And that source of hope was, well, I'm going to get my day in court. And once I get my day in court and the evidence is shown, I'll be able to prove myself innocent. And the system grind him up like the fucking piece of meat that he was, because he was just some young black kid with no power and money. And then he gave a fuck about him. And then he committed suicide. Right. So, I mean, you're describing a situation where these people are hopeless. And this is supposed to be humane. But I don't understand how you separate that from the depression and anxiety and the oppression that someone is facing by being locked in prison with these people. Like, how do you even get to make the claim that this isn't a humane action? All it is a paperwork nightmare so that some people can feel like they did something good, and they didn't. What they did is they let people kill themselves so that they don't have blood on their hands.
Okay. Oh, you were going to respond to
So what I was saying before was that I don't understand what the purpose is of imprisoning somebody. If somebody has done something so bad, imprisoning somebody for life, right? If somebody has done something so bad that we've deemed them not able to be entering back in society, that they should be imprisoned forever, I don't see what the difference is between that and just letting them opt in for death. If that is if we've deemed them so unworthy of redemption that we're not even going to give them a chance for parole, what's the point of keeping them in prison for life? If they want the ability to, like, and I get it, there's like ethical issues with this. There's like,
Right.
We want to make sure that these people aren't being coerced, but if the system is as it is right now, and that is how people are being treated in prisons, where they're not given parole, and we've decided to just remove them from society, and they're not really, I don't know, I just don't understand.
I don't know
Purpose does
that.
it serve?
I don't want to be the person defending like life in prison without the possibility of parole, because I don't want to. But like, I don't know that it's necessarily that you've decided they aren't worthy of redemption. I think the standard reasoning is that there are some people who just are literally incorrigible, who you can't possibly redeem, and whether that's demonstrated by their conduct once or repeated conduct, I don't know. There's all sorts of qualifications for how you get life in prison. But I don't know if it's like a question of worthiness so much as just like the assumption is there are people who are so bad that we could not even hope to have them re-enter society, or alternatively, as Scott said, it's an issue of punishment, that where the reasoning behind it is we have to punish this in some way, and the only possible punishment that works or that is fair or that pays their debt to society or whatever it is the rest of their life, and in
There's
confinement.
Yeah, but like, why?
we're not
Why?
making sentences based off of like what we think is I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. You can go, Doobie. I
Okay,
can't
so
form my words right now.
yeah, so and I think there's like not all these people like are still pleading their innocence. Right? Some of these people have admitted they're guilty, right? Samuel Little, I think he is the most prolific serial killer in American history. Killed like 90 people, and he's given interviews. He gave interviews gloating about it and laughing about it, right? And this man, when he was caught in 2012, he had diabetes, had a heart condition, and we ended up paying for that for the rest of his life, until he like died in like I think like 2020, in a hospital, right? The Golden State Killer, who's in prison right now, killed, raped, and murdered like I think like 50 something people, right, over decades. We're paying for that guy too. So if we have somebody like this, right, there's no chance this person's fucking innocent. They're not arguing that they're innocent. They've admitted they've done these things. What use is there to anybody, right? By having them sit there while we pay for their medication, pay for their surgeries if they have like a heart condition, pay for to keep them alive if they want to opt out, if they'd rather just check out and do assisted suicide.
Yeah, and there's no debt that's being paid by them sitting there for the rest of their lives. As it is, like with some of these crimes that we're deeming that people should be locked up forever, there's no amount of punishment that would make it a worthy like debt payer or something like that, right? It's just there's no other than just punishing somebody, that I just don't see the reason.
Yeah, like Scott, I mean, if you're like opposed to life in prison, like what kind of punishment would you give to somebody like Samuel Little or the Golden State Killer? People who've killed dozens of people, raped and murdered dozens of people across the
I
country.
didn't say I was against. So we have to engage in the system that we're in. So given the system that we're in, I won't go down a rabbit hole of other theoretical systems, right? But given the system that we're in, I said nothing about being against life in prison. What I'm against is life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So
Right,
you
and I
want
think
parole
there's a
to be on
big
the table
distinction
for
there.
somebody who's murdered like 90 people.
Yes.
Right, but the question itself is
I would just give them
regarding
the death
people.
penalty. That just seems straightforward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my position. I'm not moving from it.
Well, okay,
But like
so
what? Go ahead, start.
the argument is about specifically people who are in life in prison without the possibility for parole.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
We can all acknowledge that I'm fucking confused as to what debt is being paid here by somebody sitting there in prison with no possibility for parole. There's and what is the harm in letting somebody, other than, let's say, the cases where there could be like abuse happening, and that's why I would say there needs to be some preconditions to allowing somebody electing for death. But I don't see what the issue is. If you're already removing them from society and you deem that they are not worthy of parole, then what is the issue of letting them remove themselves from society further? If that's what they really want.
The problem here, and everyone's gonna get mad at me, but it's just true. You, Chris, might not get mad at me. Is that the question seems different depending upon what philosophical system of morality you're using and ethics you're using, right? The real problem here is that you seem to be approaching it from a utilitarian perspective, which is, they're already in prison. The consequences of this action are, oh, well, if the person kills themselves, Doobie's like, it'll be a little cheaper. to the taxpayer, right? We will save some money, and it has no effect whether or not they kill themselves or whether they just sit in prison the whole time. So why not save a little bit of money, right? And to people that believe in people that maybe they have a Christian belief or religious belief or some type of deontological perspective or natural law theory, or even possibly even a virtue ethicist position, will look at this situation differently, because the cost of housing those errant, like, extreme examples that you bring up, right? Like, I don't know how much it costs to house a serial killer another 20 years in jail, but if we compare that to, let's say, the cost of housing people in jail, or the cost of, like, America's budget, I'm sure that it would be statistically insignificant, right? And so to other people from other moral positions, they just simply say murdering people is wrong, or assisted suicide is wrong, or they have my position that said life in prison without a possibility of parole is wrong. And so they're both evil choices. And when being told to pick between evil and evil, I say, no, I don't pick the lesser of two evils.
Okay, so firstly, we always pick the lesser of two evils because everything can be measured in degrees of like evil or goodness, right? There's nothing that we fully 100% agree with, so that statement is just completely meaningless. Secondly, obviously,
Spoken like a true consequentialist.
No, that has nothing to do with your normative framework. It's just a fact of life, right? Like, that anything in life you choose is very rarely in real life, outside of video games, is there going to be like a perfect option. So you're always choosing between, you're making some sort of compromise always. There's never a perfect choice. So we're always choosing between the quote unquote lesser of two evils, especially when we're talking about punishment. We're already talking about people that have fucked up in life that are through a system that most citizens hopefully never have to engage in. So obviously there's going to be difficulty in what we say, right? Nothing is going to be perfect. Secondly, obviously there's going to be like different, depending on your moral framework, like your choice. But I mean, that's kind of what we were discussed, right? Like, to say that like, oh, everybody has a different choice, I think that's what we're here to talk about, right? Like, not to name off all the normative frameworks and say, well, anybody might think something different. Like, well, the point is, well, what do you think, right?
Right.
Yeah,
well,
so
I gave what I think, and then I was explaining to Stardust, right? And it's like, I don't see the point. And I'm like, well, here's why there's a breakaway.
I don't
right?
know why you brought in
So-
like the utilitarian, whatever philosophical. I don't
Normative
I
ethics.
don't know all that stuff, bro. I don't know.
That was for Doobie.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
okay.
but there's nobody is taking a purely like utilitarian in the sense that we're literally just analyzing dollars. I don't think anybody here took that.
Doobie
position.
was literally doing that. Doobie was literally saying, well, it's cheaper. So
No,
what
hold
the
on.
fuck? Why
I
not?
listed that as one of the benefits. So not only is it
Okay,
cheaper,
okay.
right, but no, we don't gain anything. The person doesn't gain anything. I'm sure the victims don't gain anything by knowing that the person is sitting there in a cell forever. Right, we're gonna hook them up to an IV and keep them alive for as long as we can keep them alive for fucking what? It doesn't seem like there's any reason for that. In fact, it seems cruel. If this person genuinely wants to like is in anguish over being in prison for decades or whatever, right? And they want to die, keeping them in that state, just seems, again, you're not gaining anything. You're actually losing money. They're not gaining anything. There's no possibility that they're ever getting out of that situation.
Doobie,
So why keep them
all
there?
of this can easily be brushed aside with one thing, right? Like you say, they're in anguish, right? The prison system is anguish. They're without hope, right? So they want to kill themselves to escape this system. And it only takes one example, just like your serial killer example of like, why not in this extreme example? There's plenty of other examples of like some white lady in the 1970s getting raped by some dude with a ski mask on. And then the cops being like, hey, Curly Joe, who just got out of prison for cocaine fucking, for selling cocaine and just got out of jail. Are you sure he wasn't the one that raped you? And she's like, I don't know, mate. And then he's like, yeah, no, it totally happened. And that because there's countless examples of people being put in prison for crimes that they didn't commit, right?
Yeah.
And then being exonerated later. And many of those people, if given the option to kill themselves to escape their anguish and pain, might have fucking done it. And instead, we facilitated the suicide of innocent people who could have been freed later by additional exculpatory evidence because we gave them this option to do this because we were torturing them in prison. It's torture.
Yeah. Okay. So even if it's torture, Do you feel comfortable?
Let's hear it. Even if it's torture, let's go.
Okay.
That's a
Even
great
if
way
it's
to start
do
a
you
sentence.
feel I'm sorry. I'm
No, it's funny.
I'm still kind of exploring this in my head, but even if it's torture, do you feel comfortable telling somebody like, "Hey, sorry, I can't let you decide to end your life when you want to, because guess what? This might be torture for you, and we need to reform the entire prison system before we even think about doing that." I don't feel like that's very cool.
It's
like to
supposed
let
to be torture. It's prison.
yeah,
It's
I
supposed
get
to
it's
be an
supposed to be.
unpleasant experience. That's the point. Like our point in America behind prison is that it's unpleasant, right?
Yeah. Yes, I'm perfectly comfortable telling somebody who's decided they want to kill themselves not to kill themselves and trying to stop them. Yes. Like I don't. Again, like we've argued about this before on panels, but like maybe that's controversial. But yeah.
But
Yeah.
But why? So
Because
is it
I-
just
because I-
like it's
Because I would
like
stop you if you were gonna like yeah.
okay, but there's there's a famous example. I think like a few years ago of this woman who was like sexually assaulted repeatedly, right? And she'd been in that hospital. She'd been to therapists and psychiatrists, and she just couldn't live with it. Right, so she decided to go for assisted suicide. They tried to convince her out of it, and she decided to go through with it, and she did. Right. So if somebody is their reality or their waking reality is like torment, right? Why would you and nothing that they're doing, nothing that anybody else has done has taken them out of that torment. Why would you want them to stay there?
I don't want them to stay there. I also don't want them to kill themselves. Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah,
a
I mean,
false
obviously,
dichotomy to suggest,
I'd
like, I mean,
rather-
like, when I brought this up earlier, somebody in the chat said, "Well, if you're against assisted suicide, you just don't care about people suffering." It's the same argument that I've had. No, I don't think that's true. I think it's no. What I want is
Yeah, I don't think you don't.
people
I don't think
suffering
you
to
don't
be
care about people
alleviated
suffering.
through means that I don't think are
Yeah.
morally reprehensible. So,
But
Can't we
the way
can't
that
you
their
just-
suffering would be alleviated would be possibly be them like no longer being in prison. But that's not a possibility anymore, right? So like.
You could just be of the position that like the state shouldn't be in the business of killing people. That might be a position that somebody would take, that like keeping people in prison for even indefinite amounts of time is an acceptable way for the state to punish people, but the state shouldn't be in the business of actually killing citizens. So maybe we don't ever give an option for somebody to like, do the death penalty, but you can lock people up indefinitely if the crimes they've committed societally have been decided to be bad enough that,
at the same time, I think you could say, like I tentatively do, and I'm still kind of on the fence about this. Somebody could talk me into believing that this is entirely inconsistent. But you could also believe, I think, that the state is the one who should be dealing out the death penalty. But if it is a case that we've decided it is not worthy of the death penalty, then allowing that person to opt in and commit assisted suicide is is skirting that process. If you think there is a legitimate means of dealing out death level punishments for crimes, which is the state, then yeah, just like killing yourself could be out of bounds as well. I think both of those options are possible.
Well, Destiny demanded that I pick the lesser of two evils. So
everything in
under
life
that
is picking the
framework-
lesser of two evils, yes.
Yeah. So under your framework, yeah, obviously I'm against the state doling out death in any form, shape, or capacity, including assisted suicide. If you must frame the conversation as such, but I mean I'm against both of these ideas, right? And it just seems like a way for people to try and feel better about the fact that they're locking people in prison for the rest of their life. It just seems like one more way of like, it seems like very often our society comes up with ideas where it's very separate from the violence that the state is enacting on people. And so long as it can get like a little bit of a spoonful of sugar to make medicine go down, right? Like then all of a sudden people will stop bitching for a little while.
So,
And that's what this seems like. It's like it's a
seems-
spoonful of medicine to make sugar to make the medicine go down.
so this seems like the opposite. I would say that about your position, that without actually, so you're saying that these people need to stay in a system that we acknowledge is torture. You've said multiple times is torture. You need to stay there, right? Rather than take control of your life, right? Which I think was something would be within your framework. Take control of your life and decide what you want to do with it. So this person,
That's a false choice.
it's not.
You don't have control of your life. You're locked in a cage. and you're not allowed to leave.
Ending your life is the ultimate decision, right? About your life is to end your
But
life.
it's that
right?
no,
Like,
you can't say
that's-
that's any element of choice there. You're being tortured
You
and
get very
coerced,
little
and you're not allowed
choice
to
when
leave.
you're in prison. You get very little choice when you're in prison. This is true. Yes, I know. right? It's
It's
not a
not
good
some
situation.
expansion of liberty to let people fucking kill themselves in
I
prison.
think it is.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think it is.
I think
Yeah,
it can
No,
be.
it's
I think
not.
it can be. I think it can be. I think with the right, conditions, yeah, it certainly can be. Like, I feel like the right to choose when your life ends can be like the ultimate, like, expression of I don't know, having your freedom, essentially, right?
A choice made at the end of a gun is no choice at all. If it was, it's duress. They're literally under like the most
Sure.
extreme form of duress, right?
Mhm,
Like
and I can
they're not
agree with that. I
able to make
agree.
a decision.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's a shitty situation.
Wait, we shouldn't agree. That's a stupid. It's a stupid argument. Is somebody choosing assisted suicide at the end of like cancer? Is that not a choice you can make?
Okay, why is my
Yeah.
argument a stupid argument?
People choose death before even
Because-
going into
because
chemotherapy.
Like
because
don't make
you're
throwaway
in-
insults to the argument, then
It's not-
bring up
hold on,
another
well, it's not a
argument.
throwaway insult. I'm demonstrating the stupidity of the argument. Okay, if somebody is locked in prison, they're there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the option is like either freedom or assisted suicide. It's you're either locked in prison forever, or you're locked in prison forever, or you could opt to do the death penalty if you want to do. Those are your two choices before you. Just like if you're doing assisted suicide because of like some sort of medical ailment, you're either dying of cancer or you are doing assisted suicide instead of prolonging the unhealthy years of your life of dying of cancer.
Destiny, I know you're smarter than this, so I'm just going to assume that your stupid take is because you're playing video games and not paying attention. So what I'm going to go with, right, is it is not the same thing when a system of individuals is forcing you into a cage and you have no choice.
No, hold on. You're
Versus
not
being
forced into a
afflicted
cage.
with a
No.
disease.
You're not
Oh,
forced
can I
into
walk
a
out?
cage. No,
Can I
you're
come
not
over and
forced
kill
there.
you
You're
and
there
then get
of your own
charged?
actions. Societally speaking, we have decided that if you, this is like when you fail a paper and the teacher
What
says, I didn't
actions gave this person cancer? Is it
Hold on,
now?
wait, no. We're
is it the
talking
cigarette
about we're talking about
smoking?
being in,
What are you
we're talking about
talking
being
about?
in jail. We're talking about being in jail. When you're in jail, you're not just there randomly. You've done some set of actions in society to end up in jail. You've earned that spot, just like you earned
Ideally,
that on
right?
paper.
But we were also
Unless you're
introduced the
innocent.
possibility of-
What?
So assuming you're guilty,
So yeah, that's the assumption I believe we're all working under, right? Assuming you're guilty, right, and you're going to be
you're
there
right.
anyway.
You're right. No one is, but they could be innocent, right? But assuming
Hopefully
this
an
person
innocent
is
person
guilty,
doesn't opt for the death penalty, but who knows, right? Regardless, there's problems with innocent people being in jail too. There's problems with innocent people not going to jail. Yeah, that's not part of this example. Or that's not part of the argument. The argument is if you have somebody that's in jail and they've got a life in prison, should they be able to opt for the death penalty? To say that they're being forced to opt for it, like they're already in jail. It's not like they have an option to be free. It's either
it said it's
life-
under duress.
everything and every single possible decision you make in jail is quote unquote under duress. But that's
Exactly, which is why it is the state that is the guardian of these people. It's not they don't have the ability to choose whether or not to kill themselves because they're literally locked in a fucking cage and tortured. And then that's literally like every scene in a movie with like a CIA agent that's torturing a guy and says, just give me the codes and I'll shoot you in the head and end it. That's literally what you're saying. It's like at any moment you can just end this, you can kill yourself, you can get out of this torture. I'll stop beating you for information. You're being tortured by the state. And then
you're being tortured
it's
for
not
a
the
reason
same thing
because
as
you
cancer.
earned it. You earned the torture.
Presumably.
I think I see what Destiny is doing here with the comparison to somebody who's got cancer and going through treatment for that, right? Because
two
a
separate
lot of
situations.
times, a lot of times, treatment for cancer can be torture. It can be torture, right?
Wait, no, I'm just saying that, like, he's trying to say that, like, well, it's not fair to make somebody choose something they're under duress. Like, we can get rid of that duress. Like, when you use an example of, like, somebody being tortured for information, okay, well, hopefully we can just get them out of that situation completely. We don't want anybody to be tortured for information.
Exactly, which was my argument to begin with, right?
Yes, I understand,
Even as you
but the reason-
explain your own argument,
let
the
Steven
stupidity
go.
falls
Let Steven
apart.
go, please.
The reason
Steven.
why it doesn't make sense, though, is because when it comes to, like, say, cancer, you are, like, you're there no matter what. You're either going to die of the chemotherapy, or I'm sorry, you're either going to die of the cancer in the long term, or you're going to die of it in, you can do assisted suicide in the short term, right? When we're talking about somebody in prison, there is no freedom option. There's no good option. You're always going to be there. You're always going to be under duress. That's just the reality of the situation that you're in.
Right. Again, you were trying to use another analogy to poison the well of what I'm saying
I'm not doing,
while not engaging with what I'm actually arguing.
Holy shit.
I know. When you start losing, you start saying like debate bro terms, even though you use them yourself.
Bro, you listed off all 3 normative frameworks in a conversation for no reason, okay?
It wasn't for no reason. It was to start us up on why we have a
I
disagreement.
don't understand. You should know better than to start bringing those words up to me. Okay, my brain is not big enough for that. So
I was helping you understand why there was a disagreement.
Actually, you're actually contradicting yourself because you said you brought that up for Doobie, not for me. So
no, I didn't. Someone else said I brought it up for Doobie.
No, I just said the utilitarian portion. That's it. That's what we're referring to. That's it.
Okay, well, I don't know.
Anyway,
to
get back to what Destiny is saying, you're trying to compare someone who is being actively tortured by the state that could be guilty or could be innocent, and their choice to engage in assisted suicide versus someone who has cancer, right? And then you're saying, so we can prove that duress isn't here. Right? That's not what it is. If you would like me to say, undue influence, sure, we can use undue influence instead of duress if you want to get slippery with the words. But the argument itself is that people are forcing people into a situation that they could change. The state could give people the possibility of parole. I can't uncancer people because unless you made your millions with a secret cure to cancer.
Yeah, so this is like the very first thing I said is because I say you're doing this. So what you're really arguing is that we just shouldn't have life without parole. That's the whole argument then that you're making.
It's not the whole argument.
That is the entire argument.
That is important.
You're saying that because the whole argument is that
you just pay attention.
I am paying attention. The whole argument you're saying is that there's an alternative. The state just shouldn't give people these types of sentences. That's not the argument, but that's what you want to argue. I understand. It's a fun argument to have as an anarchist because the state is bad all the time. So
usually, yeah, it is.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, if I was taking my anarchist position, it'd be a totally different argument here.
Okay, but Scott, it does seem like that is what you're arguing, right? That
no shit.
the state could give Samuel Little or the Golden State Killer guy or the Grim Sleeper, whoever the fuck, right? It could have given them the option of parole, right? But with people like this, right? How do you get these people to a point where parole is even like a realistic possibility? Like it can be on a paper somewhere, but there's if you killed like 90 people, you're probably not going to get parole at any time soon, right? So like, is having it on a piece of paper somewhere enough for you to say that, oh well, hey, this person has the option of parole, so we should just leave them in prison forever, even if we know they're never going to actually get parole?
Again, I don't have a crystal ball and I'm not omnipotent, right? So I don't know the innocence of anyone. No, you could have all of the evidence ever, right? You could have literal fucking body camera footage of them murdering people and their confession. And there's still the ever so slightest possibility that this person is innocent. It is not the purview of the state to murder people or to assist in murdering people at all. That is just my position.
How could you support putting people in prison ever?
Who should do it?
What do you mean who should do it? Just because the state's not murder should not be murdering people? Yeah, Destiny.
No, nobody should.
That's a hot take.
It's not. First of all, you're saying murder. You're using the term incorrectly. We're talking about killing somebody, right? As a punishment or justification for punishment. You think that there's no there's no amount of crime.
It's murder.
It's not murder.
It's murder.
What does murder mean to you?
If you kill someone when your life is no longer in danger, it's murder.
Okay, that's not what I don't know. Okay, for somebody's
like justice is not some form of killing that doesn't count as murder. From my approximation,
murdering is when you kill somebody without provocation. That's what murder means when we're talking ethics, right? So if somebody like kills, somebody else, and the state decides to send somebody, blah blah blah, this is not considered murder. Nobody would call that murder.
I am.
Oh, well, touche. Okay.
Do you think that you said that you think the state should not be responsible for killing people? Do you think that the state should be responsible for preventing somebody from dying, or if they want to die?
That's an interesting one, which is totally an aside. I don't know, because you can take that to its extremes, right? And then say that the state has the responsibility of, let's say, experimental drugs that are worth billions of dollars. You know what I mean? Like that have the slimmest of chance of saving someone's life. So I don't know that you can make a definitive stance there that is pragmatic in any capacity.
How does that? Sorry. How does that?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
How does that have to do with what does the experimental drug have to do with it? I'm sorry if I'm just not understanding.
What-
How does
You asked me if the state has a responsibility of maintaining someone's life.
to
no matter
prevent
what.
somebody from dying if they themselves want to die? Does the state have the right to prevent
Okay. I
that?
see what you're saying. I'm sorry. I thought you
Yeah.
were asking something else. Does the state have a right to forbid? Yeah, I think so.
Wait, but like in all cases, like the state has a right to if somebody chooses to like walk off a cliff for whatever fucking reason.
I mean, I'm doing this in the context of people in prison, not in all cases.
Does the state have the
Okay.
right to imprison somebody for life?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
So
what
so
about
long
for
as they have
life
the
without-
ability of parole, the
Yeah.
like possibility of parole.
Yeah, I mean, like, so long as they have an ability that have exculpatory evidence or there's some process so that if they're later found innocent, right, that they have the pathway to be able to
I don't think
overturn a
that's what parole
conviction.
is.
You could do that.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this
that's different than
system.
parole because like there are people who have been on death row, right? Who've been
Yeah.
shown
let
to
me
be
let me
innocent,
rephrase.
right?
Sorry. Right. Let me rephrase. I think that everyone should be able to have the ability to parole because even if they can't prove their innocence, they may be innocent, right? Even if they've exhausted all of their appellate court and everything, the Supreme Court was like, nah, deny, right? There still may be people that are innocent that can then prove themselves and change. I think everyone should have the ability to parole. That doesn't mean that you just get out automatically, right? So for your serial killer that admitted to killing 90 people, right? And there's video evidence and all of this, I think they should have the right to parole, even if we kind of know that the parole isn't going to go through. But there are some people, like there have been reformed gang members that have like shot people, and like that have become like paragons of fighting against gang activity and violence, right? That they went into prison, they spent 20 years in prison, they've been preaching to people like this is not the way to go. They have changed their fucking life. And I think, even though they have murdered people, they have absolutely murdered people in shootings. And I think that if you've done 20 or 30 years, even if you've killed 10 fucking people and you've shown an exemplar record of trying to do good in the world, you have I don't see this person as a threat to society anymore. As a matter of fact, they're a positive net gain for society and they should be let out despite killing 10 people.
Yeah, I don't understand that line of thinking, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
I mean, Scott, we've spoken before about like I've watched like a lot of serial killer documentaries and shit, right? So maybe I've just seen too many of them.
Yeah.
Maybe I've just seen too many of them, and I know too much about what these people have done or people like this have done, and I can't imagine forgiving somebody like that guy in Canada who made women into like fucking makeup products and sold them to people. Like I almost 50 of them, right? He put them in food, makeup products. I can't imagine, and he bragged about it. I can't imagine that guy ever fucking paroling out, and even if
Right,
he,
but you can't imagine him
started
paroling
writing
out.
children books and Kim Kardashian called Obama, like I absolutely not. Fuck that guy, right? So like,
Right, but you're talking
I
about
just
an
don't understand the
extreme
thinking.
case here, right? Right, and
Well,
that's
typically,
the issue.
if you're
is that
on death
talking
row
about-
or you're in prison for life, it's typically not like a normal case, right? These are people
right,
who've done
but
terrible
what I
things.
just described are people. I can't remember the person's name exactly, but I'm thinking of a specific person that was on death row for murdering multiple people that became an anti-gang activist, right?
Yeah, like Tukey Williams or whatever, right? Wrote some children books, said, "Hey, don't get into gangs or whatever the fuck," but he murdered a family, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
So still, fuck that guy. I don't think he'd write enough children's books to make up for murdering 3 people. Like I don't understand. I just don't
Right.
understand the line
I
of thinking.
think it's just a fundamental difference between you and me, which I think you think some people are irredeemable and I don't.
So,
Yeah.
The way
I want to check in with you, Chris, here. You, Chris, you haven't had a chance to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone kind of all over the place. Like, yeah, I do think to start this question, like, there is some sort of positive role that I hate talking about it like the state because I feel like we're just entering into anarchist discourse when we do that. I talk about it like in terms of the political community, the institutions that we have to live together well, whatever that looks like. Yeah, I think there's a positive role of the political community in creating a situation where fewer people want to kill themselves. And I think that any given person has, just as much of a right as any other person to stop someone from killing themselves if possible. So yes, if you see somebody walking towards towards a cliff or running out into traffic, you should try to help them. Yeah, I'm good. Like, I have no problem saying that sort of like me coercively stopping you from doing violent harm to yourself is a good thing. Yeah, you should do that. So yeah, I don't really like, we're kind of all over the place with this conversation. Like I said, I think there's different possible justifications for the death penalty, and then assisted suicide, which really is kind of what we're talking about. Assisted suicide in a particular case where maybe somebody's under duress, or they're a punishment for something that maybe they deserve. Yeah, but like it's a particular kind of assisted suicide. So yeah, I think they're like, yeah, I don't know. We've gone all over the place. So.
Well,
Always
the
happens.
thing is, we're specifically talking about, again, a situation and when somebody has no chance of parole.
So I feel like that in a system lacking of any sort of compassion, being the American prison system, that giving people that sort of choice is a very poor form of compassion. That it's not that I would be doing this to make myself feel better, which is something Scott said previously, right? I'm doing this because I want to give people the option of what to do with their own lives. This is why I'm for assisted suicide in general. That if you are going through some sort of pain, if you're saying this is torture, right? Then if you're going through this pain, then you should have the ability to end it on your own terms. So this is why. So I that's why I don't buy this saying that we're doing this just to make ourselves feel better. Not at all, right? If I was going to make myself feel better, and I had a magic political wand, then I'd have a completely different system on our hands, right? But I can't do that, right? I can't actually make myself feel better, right? All I can do is give these people the opportunity, and I think that the threat. So even this option was available, I think that only very few people would take it. I think most people would have that hope that, okay, especially if I didn't do it, right? You didn't do it, then there's a possibility that evidence comes up. People understand, right, that others get out because maybe the prosecutor fucked them over, which is a thing that happens, right? Maybe you just you had a bad trial to start with, and if you got a second one, things would turn out better. There's all kinds of reasons why these things happen, and especially if you are actually innocent, I think those people would stick around, right? Maybe a few of them would take that option, but and we can
Where are you
put
getting that from?
safeguards. We can put safeguards in place to help evaluate them, right? So that they don't feel pressured.
Right, but now you're talking about so like when engaging with assisted suicide, just for a second, right? Are you for them going through several stages of psychological evaluation to determine that they're fit? Okay, so how does one do that in prison where we know that there is this element, this force? Like why does it matter? Do you care? Would you do that in prison? Do you care?
Sorry, yeah, I would, right? And I'm for like medically assisted suicide, where like the element, right, the coercive element is their own body. That's betraying them, that's causing them immense amount of pain, right? Even within that situation, I think you can evaluate a person, right, and to see that if they are capable of making this decision, or not being pressured to do it for, inheritance money or whatever the fuck.
So Prime, I want to hone in on the idea that like if someone was innocent and they had that element of hope, that this would not be something that would be like an appealing option to them. I just don't think that really holds up. So going back to something like Destiny's opening, right, where he was basically saying like this creates a framework, an institution where certain choices and incentives are just super skewed. We already know that people faced with the choice of a lengthy trial and maybe losing, even though they know they're innocent, will take a plea deal and plead guilty to something that they didn't do, right? So in the same way, I just don't see how that would apply to this situation, which exactly as Scott is talking about. What you're faced with is a possible lifetime of just abject torture. We've kind of all agreed that this is a kind of torture. It's supposed to be punishment, whatever it is. It's supposed to be punishment. So agreed that this is some kind of suffering, some sort of immense pain that you're looking forward to. It's that, or it's I could just end it quickly. What's my possibility of getting out? Not that great, actually, unless something crazy happens, like if you happen to live in this transitional era where DNA evidence starts being a real thing, right? But now, like, what's the chances? What are the odds? I weigh my odds against, like, the bliss of nothingness, and I think the nothingness sounds really good. Yeah, I see it happening just the same way that people get pressured into pleading guilty for things that they didn't do all the time.
But
So
people do this.
even with that, sorry.
No,
go ahead.
Stardust, you go first.
Okay, even with that, like, let's say that, yeah, this is like this torturous environment, and they're forced to, they're forced to be in this torturous environment, and they're making this decision out of duress. I still don't feel like I can, like, tell somebody, no, too bad, you have to live through this torture for the rest of your life because we don't have a better system for you.
But you've already told them
Then
that.
leave them the sheets in their cell. I don't know. Like I
Right,
just,
you've
I don't
already
know, like,
told them that.
why you have to incentivize this through an opt-in program. Like,
Right. I mean, like the choice that we're making here, right, is between we have told you that we are going to torture you for the rest of your life, and then we're now presenting with a new policy idea, which is that you can opt out of that torture for the rest of your life by killing yourself. These are your two choices, right?
If you want to remove, like, the possibility of somebody re-entering society, it's the same thing. Like, both of these things are the same thing. If this person is so bad you don't want them to re-enter society, it's essentially either you're removing them from society by imprisoning them forever, or you're removing them from society by allowing that person to end their life.
Go ahead, Doobie.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, what the extent of this is. So some of these guys, like Charles Ng, for example, who you can go on YouTube right now and find videos of this guy and Leonard Lake taunting a woman they're about to rape and murder, rape and torture, right? So there's no question this guy fucking did it, right? He had, like, multiple heart surgeries. The son of Sam killer has had multiple heart surgeries, right? So if they're in prison, I think son of Sam has like 6 life sentences. Right. So if they're in prison for life, like, should we then pay to keep them alive to deal with any, like, health issues they have? Because that if we're gonna keep them there forever until they die, like, why would we extend their life? It just seems like, I mean, would you support that, Scott? Like, paying for all their surgeries and medical issues?
I mean, I think if we're going to have state-run prison system, then we have to determine what is and isn't reasonable in that regard, right? Because, like I mentioned before, if you can get into the realm of, like, absurdity, right? If there's some weird experimental procedure that costs an inordinate amount of money and has a very low likelihood of doing something, so we do have to determine what is reasonable. But the fact of the matter is that by taking away someone's freedom of movement, by locking them in a cage, the state has taken guardianship of that person. They are responsible for that person's will. They are responsible for that person's safety. They are responsible for that person's health and well-being. If you disagree with that because you have a moral system that is so much more slated towards, I don't know, some form of judgment and punishment based thing, right? I can understand that, but my position is what I just laid out. The state is responsible for their health, well-being, and safety when they take over ownership of this person and responsibility for this person.
You've acknowledged that it's torture.
I have.
It seems like not only are we torturing them, but we're, like, going out of our way through like heart surgeries and shit that cost, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars to extend the torture.
Right, but again, I'm against the current system, right? Like,
I feel like Scott was right in the sense that, like, what this really comes down to is it possibly some sort of broader ethical system that you may have a pre-adherence to, or at least, like, some sort of theory about what criminal justice exists for. And at least in the United States, I know there's disagreements about why we should punish people, but the prison system as it originally developed in the United States, like, sort of mid-1800s, was designed to be rehabilitative and punitive, right? It was supposed to be suffering, but the suffering was supposed to cause a kind of internal reflection self-reflection. Like, what did I do to bring this on myself? Like, why have I done this? Would I ever do this again? And supposed to kind of scare them out of this. So in like the early prisons, like in Sing Sing and others like that, like they had enforced codes of silence, like extreme isolation. The idea was to inspire as much like self-reflection as possible. So when you reach the end of your term, you could, you know, be a reformed person. And the data has always been against the idea that it actually worked, but like that was part of the idea. So what we're doing when we have a life sentence without the possibility of parole is monkeying with that system in some way that I think is we're struggling with. Like, what's the point? What's the goal? What's the end here? I think we're all like kind of dancing around.
I still feel like we haven't determined what is the difference in when we're removing somebody from a society because we've determined that they're too dangerous to be in society. What's the difference between putting them in prison for life and letting them end their own life?
I mean, I think the difference is that they're alive. That they're like I mean, if I was on their side and I'm not, I would just say that they're alive.
Well, then let us answer.
Well, but you haven't said it. You haven't actually said it. But like one of the reasons is that they are alive, and that they are a valuable individual, right, on their own as a human being.
How are they contributing?
Well, you don't have to. Okay, so then
if
that's the answer that you're going with, then that's a dangerous slip right there, because you could have a person who is like fucking paraplegic or some shit, right? Who is not contributing to society, and then
we're talking about it's specifically life in prison, though. We're talking about we have decided to remove this person from society because they are too dangerous to be part of it. So if you're in life in prison, what's the difference between keeping them in life in prison and allowing them to elect for execution?
This is why I brought up the ethics, right? Because it is the difference is what do you believe is right and wrong, and we believe, and I believe at least that it is wrong.
I think you guys are like afraid of the purging the undesirable.
Why is it wrong?
But there's some people who are undesirable, i.e., rapists, murderers, serial killers, shit like this. Right? Why? And we decided that they're undesirable to the point where we stick them in a cage, right, away from everybody. Right? So like I don't.
Okay, Doobie. So if
why is it wrong?
It's a matter of purging the undesirables. You'd be in a cage, Doobie.
Doobie, if the only moral equation you're going to do is what is the most successful thing to the rest of society, right? Then we can look at research that shows that the death penalty itself doesn't act as a deterrent against crime. And what we can do is we can go, well, you know what? Why does the death penalty not act as a deterrent? Well, that's because people sit in death row forever. It's essentially a long prison sentence. And really, people are just as scared of being caught so long as they're going to spend some time in prison.
Wrong?
So if we want to use it as a deterrent, since we have these serial killers, why don't we just take them out to a public stage and then flay them alive? And have it nationally televised, right? And then we can get some utility out of them, right? Because the next time somebody is thinking about like, the next time a priest is thinking about molesting his little altar boy, he remembers vividly that guy that was flayed alive on national television, and maybe that will act as a slightly stronger deterrent.
Well, you'd have to like weigh that against the societal trauma of like millions of people seeing somebody flayed alive by the government on TV.
I mean, right, so you don't know. So
but I would support making it much easier to execute people, of course.
Is that even the reason though? Like, is that your reason for why we put people away like this? Like, to me, I always thought the reason was we're removing this person. The most important part for me was that.
Stardust, it's your reasoning.
Okay, right, Scott. Explain to me why it's wrong. Explain to me exactly why it's wrong.
Because it's wrong to murder people, and it's wrong for the state to imprison people for life without parole.
Wants to murder themselves
while you're torturing them,
end their own life.
And but no, in assisted suicide, you are bringing someone else into this equation. You have to like.
Yes,
we're talking about somebody opting into a death penalty, right? Right. So yeah, somebody. I mean, if y'all are cool with the guy who like consented to being cannibalized, I guess that's fine. But like, you're bringing somebody else into the equation who's going to be doing the killing of you, right?
Yeah,
you're asking for help, so it's not just you.
I mean, yeah, sure, but again, it's their body, right? If they want to end their life, that should be their choice to do. I don't understand. You still haven't explained to me like what's wrong about it. Why is it wrong?
Go ahead, Tubi.
Yeah, so, well, I want to give Scott a chance to answer that, actually, but if he needs some time. Can't think of
I
anything.
mean, I'm just not going to devolve this discussion into like going deep into like why I believe in a natural law philosophy and like why I'm against certain that like it's like I'm not going to go that deep
Oh,
down. the
so
rabbit hole.
okay, I'm
It was
on a panel and I'm
already
just not going to
too
engage
much
with
for
the
you,
question.
Stardust.
Okay, all right.
I mean, if you
so I
want
had
me
a-
to,
You
Stardust,
can't
we
engage
can.
with the question without just answering. Just answer it like a normal person.
I have answered it like a normal person, and it was already too complicated for you. So me getting more complicated isn't going to help you.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay.
I see. Okay.
So I actually had so Destiny, like earlier you said that well that's what the punishment is, right? We've decided they're gonna be in prison forever. So that's what the punishment is, and they don't get to opt out. But what would you say to the question that I asked earlier? Should we, if we decided that's what the punishment is, right? They're in there forever. Would you then like support extending their life through like medical intervention when they have issues and shit? Like how far would you take that?
Probably to whatever. I mean, I don't think we've decided that the punishment needs to be like an immortality of suffering or something, right? So I mean, if somebody
Right.
is in prison and they want to sign like a DNR, I don't think anybody would be opposed to that.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Scott, what do you think about that? So somebody's being tortured in prison and they have a health issue. And would you say that it's okay for them to sign a DNR, right? So that if they were to die from this health issue, don't resuscitate them. Because they're doing this under duress, you remember.
No.
So
I don't think they have the will to be able to sign a DNR while under duress. No.
Nice.
So you
Scott's
would
in favor of them being infinitely tortured.
Yeah, that's like
Jesus Christ.
so you would be.
I mean, I'm
like,
against
having them
the
hooked up to
system, but, like,
machines where they're
engaging
like
with the-
200 years old to like keep their
So
heart
some
pumping.
dude is like fucking dying in bed, and fucking Scott's like, no, dude, like you're gonna be here forever. Like, sorry, you don't have the opportunity to die. Like, we're just gonna keep resuscitating. You're gonna keep CPRing you over and 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 over.
I mean, I'll give them
You're gonna
morphine. You
give
know what I
him,
mean?
like monkey hearts,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
No, I'll give
you're
him
gonna keep
morphine.
this
You know what I mean?
motherfucker
Like I'll
alive.
let him die in peace, like without pain. But like he or she, right? Because there are some females, believe it or not, rare as it is, on death row.
Soon as Stardust.
but
Go ahead. Yeah.
Right. but yeah, no, that it's the same argument, right? I don't think they have the will under duress to be able to say that they want to kill themselves. So why would they magically have that same will when you just add like a little bit more of health issues? Like, no, they don't
Add
have the
some
capacity.
paperwork to it, yeah.
Right. Like the argument stands the same. You have to be consistent here. I mean, it sucks for that person that like they have cancer and they're in like death row and we're like, have some chemo, buddy. But like,
Do you have to be
Yeah.
consistent?
we have a fucked up
Enjoy
system.
Vomiting for however long you're. in
Do you have to be
chemotherapy.
consistent or do you have to be empathetic? Right? Like, so if a person, and I feel like it's a
Being
low
consistent,
bar.
consistent is being empathetic.
I disagree. When you're saying that I'm going to extend this torture for as long as humanly possible, right? So maybe not with the forever replacing their hearts with monkey hearts, right? Maybe not that, but just below that, right? We're going to keep them alive for as long as possible, even if they say they don't want to, right? So they could be going through like chemo or something, right? Which is, as I understand it, absolutely fucking terrible. While imprisoned. And then they're saying, well, okay, if my body starts to give out, let me go. You're saying no. While you're in prison, you don't have the right to consent there. And so yeah, you're gonna go through a prison and then the extra torture of chemo.
Yeah, I don't understand how, like, because you're saying that the state shouldn't have the ability to like or the right to kill somebody, right? But you'd give them the right to keep somebody alive in torturous conditions for as long as possible. Someone
you
who
can-
doesn't
you
want to
can-
be in those conditions.
I mean, I've already made the argument. You can try and say it in the most uncharitable way ever, but
I don't
here's
think
the
we're being
argument.
uncharitable.
Not
The
uncharitable.
argument, the
It's
argument,
exactly...
the argument is this: is that you are torturing people. They do not have the ability to consent to kill themselves because they are being tortured. The state is the guardian of that person. They are responsible for the health and safety of that person.
Do you think normal
Right, the
people should have the right to sign a DNR since their ability to consent is compromised since they're suffering from a disease?
Again, you bring up you finally come back into the discussion to bring up your already defeated point that it's not the
Scott,
same thing.
What do you think? Wait, what do you
Defeated
think a DNR
point.
is?
Do not resuscitate. It means if you're dying,
Yeah,
they're
so
not gonna
we
attempt
were
to
just
bring you back
talking
to life.
about so we were just talking about a DNR for a prisoner. So do you think normal people should be allowed to have DNRs?
Yes.
Yeah. But prisoners aren't. So aren't you technically like revoking rights from them for your moral answer here? Like you're taking something.
I'm not
away from them?
revoking rights. The state doesn't guarantee rights. The state has taken guardianship of someone because they've taken away their rights.
So in that case, though, the prisoner basically has less rights afforded to them than like a person in a hospital would, no? Because now if they were in a normal
because the state took them.
Okay.
It doesn't then get to torture them with the idea of getting them back so that they can kill themselves. Especially when we know that the system isn't perfect and that some people are going, I don't know what the number is, but some people are going to choose to kill themselves and later be found innocent. That is going to happen.
Wait, why would you be in favor
I don't
of
want to live in Scott's state. Can I just say that? I don't want to live in his state.
Oh, he doesn't want the state. He
is
doesn't want the
very-
state. But like, yeah.
I know he doesn't want one, but if he had
Is
one,
it a
man, I
stateless,
would not wanna
classless
live there.
society?
Well,
Wait, so what? I don't understand. Like,
no wonder he
maybe
doesn't like states.
maybe
This
there's an
place
explanation to
fucking
this.
sucks.
I'm not.
Damn.
Maybe there's an explanation to this. I'm not thinking of Scott, but this seems to be like a contradiction. So you're opposed to assisted suicide. I think that was your position, but you're in favor of people being able to sign
that's
DNRs.
Eucharist. That's
Okay,
Eucharist.
so you're for assisted suicide.
Yeah, I'm all for assisted suicide.
Okay, yeah. Then I missed that.
So, okay, I want to. Scott has a magnetism about him, able to make every topic about him. And
I'm not trying to.
No, I know you're not. I know you're actually not trying to do that. But still, we've fallen under his spell. Eucharist has an opinion from a different angle, and I actually want to examine that too for our remaining time on this topic. So Eucharist, right? Like, you're the understudy, right? But now you'll be the star of the show. Eucharist, tell me more about your reasons for being wrong. Go ahead.
I don't really know what else to say. I don't want to make this just an assisted suicide conversation again, but to like what Doobie just said, like, no, I don't think there is an inherent contradiction between opposing assisted suicide and being okay with DNRs, because withdrawal of care is ethically different than active intervention to hasten death, and that's an ethical distinction that already exists in medical care and in hospitals. So it's the work has been done to defend it, and we can use some fancy terms like doctrine of double effect to hash it out. But I don't think there's a contradiction between those things. I'm openly opposed to assisted suicide. So the reason I come into this conversation saying no, we should not give the prisoner an opportunity to kill themselves is just because up front I'm already opposed to that class of things which I would consider assisted suicide. So all these considerations about like, well, this is torture, etc. It's not super persuasive to me. I think in both cases, I actually do think the case of the prisoner and the case of the cancer patient are analogous in some way, in the sense that I just think y'all are silly to think of suicide as this like one glorious liberty option in this scenario. It's a horrific choice in the face of horrific options. Yeah, so like, I mean, maybe it's a lesser of two evils kind of thing, but I don't view it as the, like, giving somebody
Scott,
some sort of like essential freedom that improves their situation in any way necessarily.
but Scott, if someone has
Eucharist?
oh, I'm sorry, Eucharist.
They're
I'm
all-
used to yelling. I'm
Yes,
used to yelling
I'm
at
my own
Scott.
person.
I just can't help it. But Eucharist. So, but if someone has like a very serious condition, right? They're like a terminal illness. There's no hope that they're going to recover from this thing, and they'd rather check out early than go through the pain that's going to get them to the point where they can use a DNR. You'd say that they should go through that pain, that they should wait for their body to decay while they're alive, and and then you're gonna not resuscitate them. Like, why would you? I don't understand. Like,
I mean,
why?
I
Like,
think it's a separate conversation. Like, unless we want to turn this purely into an assisted suicide suffering panel, we can.
I mean,
do that,
it's
guess,
kind of
if I want
connected,
to,
right?
but-
So, like,
is connected.
these people in prison are suffering.
and I would
in the
want to
same way.
know why. Yeah.
But yeah, because it's a conversation Prime and I had at length one-on-one after the last time we argued about this, which is I don't think that an individual's suffering justifies doing something that I already think is a bad thing to do,
Why do
that
you
you
think
ought
it's
not
bad?
do, like kill yourself. It's evil. It's wrong.
Why do you
Do you
think
believe in
it's
like mercy
evil?
killing? Like if somebody's like fucking agony and there's no they're like
No.
split open.
Yeah.
So you
No.
would just
Why
let
is
them
it-
suffer
why
until
is
they
it
die?
evil?
No, I think you would try to do whatever you could to comfort them until they died. Yeah, like so we have palliative care. We have ethics surrounding these issues of how we bring people comfort in as they are dying and as they are suffering. But that's different than intervening to kill them. Those are two different things. Yeah. I think yes. I think we should be able to ethically distinguish between choosing to kill somebody and choosing to comfort someone as they are already dying from a natural process. Yeah.
Why is it evil?
I mean, we can bring Scott's terms back into this. I buy into a natural law theory, some things about the intrinsic value of human life, et cetera, et cetera. What human life is a good that unless there's some greater good
Well, I
that
mean, human
outweighs
life
it.
can be good.
Yeah.
Human life can be good, but you can still
Is a
acknowledge
good,
that, like,
yeah.
when it's time for somebody to choose to go, then
Yeah, I don't
make
think we
that
get
choice.
to. I don't think in most non-exigent circumstances we get to choose to go. I think there are circumstances where choosing to go could be legitimate. We could hash that out. It's a whole complex ethics conversation. But
I genuinely don't understand this line of thinking.
Okay.
It actually seems like way more like I don't want to say hardcore. It sounds way more cruel than even like my position, right? In terms of like, because you're saying that if somebody is like they're going to suffer, there's no way to stop the suffering. Maybe you can give some pain meds, but they're gonna decay, they're gonna die. There's no way to cure this disease. You would say, yeah, you need to go through that pain, right? Rather than like
I don't
checking out
think stopping
comfortably.
suffering is an end ethical goal that we should pursue at any expense, right? It's not like there are things that, like, yes, alleviation of suffering is in general a great thing and good thing, and we should do it and we should pursue it so far as we aren't doing other bad and illegitimate things to pursue that end. Yeah. So yes, I think there are circumstances where suffering is preferable to doing something wrong. Yeah.
I'm just,
I just don't get how it's wrong. I just don't get how it's wrong to give somebody that choice when you know that they have
because it's
the
not a
only other
choice.
It is a choice. The other choice that they have is suffering, is being tortured. I don't understand how it's wrong to give them an alternative to that.
Because killing them is wrong.
Okay, but we're not gonna. Okay, so in the case of the prisoners, we're not gonna let them out, right? Because we've decided they're a danger to everybody. In the case of the person with the terminal illness, there's no way for us to get rid of that illness. We can't just magic it away, right? So like, it just seems like you guys are in favor of causing these people suffering for like no good reason.
No, I'm not in favor of causing them suffering. They're experiencing suffering, and I'm not in favor of all available options of alleviating
allowing
that
them to
suffering.
die. Not allowing them to die is like literally causing them suffering.
No,
right?
they're in a circumstance, they have an illness or something that is causing them suffering, right? And then there are things that you could do to alleviate that suffering potentially. And I don't think all things that alleviate suffering are necessarily good, legitimate, fine, whatever.
I don't
right?
think it's good to prolong somebody in suffering, though. I think that's wrong too. I think that's evil too.
I wouldn't say it is a good thing to prolong someone's suffering. I would say there are things that you ought not do to shorten suffering. Like, can you not think of anything that you would like, if I could come up with a crazy moral dilemma that would say, if you do this horrific thing, it would alleviate someone's suffering. I think we could think of examples where you would say, no, okay, that's not okay. Right. So I'm saying there are things that are out of bounds that we should not like if we I'm not even going to get into this. It's just ridiculous.
The very idea of suicide for most people is that they feel that they are suffering so much that they would rather not suffer any longer. Right. So some of you guys have taken this position from prison, right? That prison is, I guess in your approximation, the idea of prison is just to keep society safe. You don't believe in rehabilitation for these people because they're on death row. And you also don't believe in there needing to be a sense of justice for these people.
No,
right?
It's
so
not the state says that.
Nothing
The
will
state
be
has already done that. State has said that that they're not going to be
okay.
Like the state has put this in place and then has sentenced them to a sentence that says that they can't escape. That no matter what change they make within prison, they're still going to be in prison, where they become that paragon you're talking about, right? Since that's already established, then and you already established that it's torture, right? Some great torture. Then let's give them another option, right?
Okay. Roger, thank you for reframing everything that I was saying. So anyways, the problem is do you trust, I guess there's something to add into this. Do you trust in any way, shape, or form the capacity of the state to actually not just murder people?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that the systems will be set up ethically and right while they're in prison, while they're obviously under duress, while they're could you like what happens when people are in solitary confinement, right? What happens when the real problem is that, my uncle, for example, right? My uncle was in a relationship and murdered someone. Who was black and he was white in Memphis, right? And so he's in a position where he's in constant threat of danger in prison because he's a white man that murdered a black woman, right? And he argued it was in self-defense. I don't think so. But at the same time, it may have been a passion killing or something. They're both high on crack. But the fact of the matter is that he didn't really murder her because she was black. They were dating, but he murdered a black woman. And he's in constant threat of being murdered by other people. Like, there are so many fucking factors here and so many errors of corruption. Do you honestly believe that the prison system, that I think almost all of us, maybe one or two in the chat doesn't agree, is a fucked up and corrupted system in America, is gonna actually use its power responsibly to allow in suicide for people that are only very properly vetted in their desire to go out simply because that's the choice they're making? And how do you separate that from the torture that they're going under?
So before either you respond to that, I think that kind of goes along with what Destiny was saying at the very start. Like, as to why you were against it because there's like conflicts of interest. Could you expand on that?
You're talking to Destiny.
Yeah,
right?
Steven.
Oh, for me, for the conflict of interest?
Yeah.
I wasn't saying there was conflict of interest. I was saying that they're like weird perverse incentives.
Yeah.
That so like and I think we've already kind of gone over these, but like basically the idea that like there's probably going to be a disproportionate number of like ethnic groups will disproportionately get into like the choosing to take the death penalty. Certain prison systems are probably going to like some prisons might just be really bad, and so people are going to elect to pick the death penalty here. And when people do these in certain areas, I think people are going to be very unsatisfied, rightfully so, with like those types of quote unquote choices, because it'll feel like, oh well, and then we also it'll feel like, okay, well, some people are choosing this because the prison system is so fucked here, this isn't right, like something should change here.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I can't disagree there, but so like the response there though should be that along with this we should make further changes. Like,
hold on, PrimeCayes, we're not allowed to do that. We have to stick within the bounds of the question itself, PrimeCayes.
No, yeah, sure, okay, fine. But I feel that that if we acknowledge, right, that these systems are so bad, right, then and they are being tortured, that exists, right, whether us as a society are paying attention to this problem or not, right? And some of those places are really bad or terrible, right? So I think the greatest problem with my argument is that, well, stop it, Doobie. The greatest problem with my argument is that it gives those places that have the least empathy, right, who are the most vicious to the prisoners, reasons to be more vicious to a certain segment of their population, right? Because there's a possibility that they would do this. So I think that's fair criticism. But still, I wouldn't want to take this possibility away from the prison system as a whole, right? The prison, the lifers as a whole. And I would rather look for other solutions, and there are other solutions, than saying that you simply don't get this option. Steven.
Well, are you asking me if like can we do it under our today's system, or do we wait until we have like a more perfect system, or what do you mean?
Do what under the system? You mean like put what exactly? Expand on that. I'm sorry.
Wait, you expand. You're asking me the question. I thought you were asking Scott a question. Sorry. Repeat that.
Scott just interjected.
I was just fucking with you because every time I go out of bounds even a little bit on this and say the whole system is fucked, you're like, no, but you have to engage with this.
Can I ask, so is it so what I'm wondering is if it's like actually the system, right? So if we had a perfect system where we knew people who were found guilty were actually guilty, right? And you know the prison system wasn't like shit, and people weren't getting raped and beaten up in prison, and the guards weren't shit, and everybody was nice, and yada yada yada. If we had a good system, but we still had people who were serial killers, serial rapists, right? Who was too dangerous to have in society, so we decided to stick them in prison, with the possibility of parole, Scott, for life, right?
Mhm.
But these were people that are so fucking dangerous, right? That the chances of them actually attaining parole are pretty low, right? So if we had that system, would you then be for allowing people to go with assisted suicide?
Well, some segment of our population would have to be godlike figures of
Yeah,
omnipotence.
sure. I understand.
So I couldn't imagine what that fantasy world looks like. We don't have
Well,
a perfect
I just
system.
described it for you.
We don't have any understanding of the human brain that would evolve us into such a creature, or understanding of the technology and what its impacts on the world would
Well,
be. You're talking about science fiction beyond.
I feel like
But
you're
this
not
is-
engaged. I feel like there's
Yeah,
no
Yeah, I'm
reason
not
not to
engaged with
engage
it
because
because
it's hypothetical.
you're-
I think when
Like,
it comes to
it's
this
because
type
it's
of
too
perfection, I think
hypothetical.
it becomes really hard to like because so many things are changing at this point that like the structures that we're even analyzing are just like incomprehensible to what we have now. It's kind of like saying imagine if you could like rape people who could like delete their minds and have no problems, but then also turn back time. Does that make it okay? Like it becomes incomprehensible at that point, I think.
Yeah,
Because everything
it's
surrounding
just-
these systems would
yeah.
change. Who goes to jail? Why they go to jail? Can they be rehabilitated? What kind of rehabilitation we have? How do we sentence people? Like everything would change so much that the answer becomes meaningless, I think. I think
Like,
it's
does crime even exist in that society? Like,
yeah.
we
So
don't.
there's
I don't
so
know.
there's not like a conceivable system, right? That you guys can imagine, right? Where it would be okay to have assisted suicide as an option.
In prison under what?
So I'm asking if there's a conceivable prison, right, in the future at any point.
No.
In your in-cap society, maybe, right, where having the option of opting assisted suicide would be like reasonable, because we're not dealing with the racism or whatever the fuck that might lead people to pushing people to that option.
Yeah, I mean, like, and if I was envisioning my perfect society, like, I don't even believe in involuntary prisons, dude.
Okay,
Like-
so it seems like the issue isn't so much the system itself, because we can't even imagine the system where
No, the
okay,
issue is the system itself.
okay, but okay, but is it like just that there are like humans involved and humans can make mistakes? So at some point there might like be like a 0.1% chance that at some point someone who's innocent would go for assisted suicide because they're being tortured by guards or whatever. Like,
I don't know why you're saying-
if
what
we're
is-
at that
what's
level, like
random
why
number?
support like putting people in jail?
I
at
already
all?
gave you a case of people that got out of prison and committed suicide because of the tortures that they experienced in prison.
Sure.
Much less people that are in prison. And
Yeah, there are people who've spent 20, 30 years in prison who were not guilty, right? So should
Exactly.
we just not? So because that possibility exists, should we not have prison on the table?
You're saying because that possibility exists, and what I'm saying is the action itself is wrong.
Wait,
You just
well,
think
you
murder-
don't you
I'm
don't
not
think
doing.
you don't think
I'm not
the
doing
action.
the right. I'm not doing the right and wrong calculus based off of its consequences. I'm doing the right and wrong calculus based off of saying that the state, who has people in its custody and in its charge, do not have the right to assist in killing them.
Okay, like ever in any
Ever.
situation. Okay, so this is some like some deep-seated moral position that probably doesn't make any sense.
Sure, it doesn't make
Okay.
any sense. It's such a crazy idea that people believe the state killing its citizens is wrong. It's such a fringe minority
it
of
is,
people in the
actually.
world.
Yeah, I think plenty of
But
people
it's
out
not
there
even
can think of
this-
situations where it might be okay for the state to kill somebody.
It's not even the state killing. If it's the person who wants to die, right? The state is just assisting them. It's not like
Would it make
I mean,
a
I
difference
feel
if
like
it
that's
was
a distinction without a
would it
difference.
make a
I mean,
difference? If it was
how could you even be for suicide then? If we're dealing, if you're, we could talk about the society as it is, right? And oh God, we're, this terrible corrupt capitalist system, right, where people are forced to grind their nose against a stone to get food on their table and to drink water and to have clothing and shit like that. This system drives people into depression, into despair. So how could we possibly allow people to kill themselves if the system itself is what's making them depressed? Like
Now
that's
you're
such,
talking, Doobie. You're tracking
it's
with me. All right,
yeah,
let's
it's
go.
but okay. I said the thing, but I think it's a dumb thing, right? I'm asking Scott, like, how could you
I
support
know,
a
but you're making
suicide?
good points. Like, keep
No,
it
it's
up. The
not.
servile state is a thing.
No,
Let's
it's
talk
not.
about
This is
it.
this
Like,
is like this is like saying that so long as we have capitalism, all prostitution is rape because sexual exploitation, right? Like it's silly, right? So Scott, like, how do you square those two things?
Is it conceivable that there are people in prison that are of sound mind and body that want to kill themselves? Yes. The problem is that they are in custody, and the ability for us to differentiate between those people that are of sound mind and body that want to kill themselves for whatever reason, and of those that are doing so because of the circumstances of the torture that they are in, is part of the problem. And the other part of the problem is that the state has become custodians of these people by taking away their rights, by taking away their right of movement, by taking away their right
Okay.
of liberty and the
But
ability to do those things.
we already agreed
their
that they have some kind of
responsibility to do that.
responsibility to fund these people's like healthcare and shit like that.
Yeah.
Right. So if one of the requirements is that they go through like a lengthy examination with multiple like visits with a psychiatrist or therapist or whatever the fuck, right? And maybe you can even give them like medication to try to help with their depression, try to convince them out of this mindset. And if none of that works, right, and they still want to kill themselves, and the state has gone, above and beyond to try to make sure this person is of sound mind when they're making this decision, would you still say that the state shouldn't do it?
From a moral position, at a certain point of arbitrary like amounts of work put into it, I would, in order to be consistent, I would have to say yes. The problem is that I would never advocate for something like that, because I think that you're talking about something that would never exist in actuality, because I don't think the prison system would be able to come up with a program that is that effective and that meaningful and that well done. Instead, I think there would be instances of prison guards murdering people, of people torturing people to do certain things, of people killing themselves, because they're in danger in prison and they don't want to die violently. They want to die peacefully, et cetera, et cetera. There's way too many problems and issues with this.
But the way that
I don't think it's
execution
conceivable.
works, that's not even how elective execution works. People still have a waiting time. People still have a waiting, like, when they elect to be executed. It's not an immediate thing.
Yeah, and I don't think it's inconceivable to think that the state would give these people like mental health care, because the state already does that, right? Prisoners do have access to therapists and to psychiatrists and whatnot.
Why would I? Who said that it's inconceivable that the state?
You said
would
it'd be
provide mental health
inconceivable
care?
that the state would do the necessary
How many-
checks, right?
how many
i.e.
fucking-
having them see a therapist, having them see.
dots you have to do to
Wait,
make
no,
me say
hold
some
on.
shit I never said.
That's what you were. I gave you the example, right? So if the state was ensuring through having these people see therapists and psychiatrists and whatnot, ensuring that that they are of sound mind and this is what they wanted to do, right? Would you be okay with it? And you said you'd have to say yes, but you think that that situation would be inconceivable, right? So
Right, because
given that
how
the
do you
state already
separate-
provides mental health services to prisoners, it doesn't seem that inconceivable.
Unless if you're equating the state providing a psychologist for the state being able to determine people that are in torturous conditions and isolated and being tortured and all of the variables that go into that, the state being able to adequately screen all of those people, it's an impossibility.
I don't see how that's even more complicated than somebody who has been like sexually assaulted multiple times, and they're going to psychiatrists and saying, "Hey, I want to kill myself," because there are tons of factors there, right? Maybe it's their home life, maybe it's their job, maybe they're not eating right, maybe they need medication, right? So I don't think it's any less complicated, right? Than that equation. Right. So
Um,
if you're for assisted suicide generally, right, and you
And-
think
and
somebody has
those-
the ability to make that determination, why wouldn't you think that somebody would have the ability to make the determination in this case?
if you go and talk to, like, I mean, and I know that you probably have, but like go talk to them again, counselors or masters in social work or psychologists, right? And they'll admit, if they've been doing it for quite a long time, right, that they make mistakes, that there's tons of things that they didn't catch, that people just slip through the fucking cracks, that they think they're getting some progress with somebody, and then the next thing you know, they end up committing suicide, and they had no idea that that was going to happen, right? Like it's a thing that counselors and mental health professionals constantly have to engage in, is burnout from the failures that they have.
Okay, but then why are you for assisted suicide if you're saying that the people? Because earlier you asked Prime, "Hey, are you for these people seeing therapists and whatnot?" Prior, Prime said yes, and you're okay with that. But if you're saying now that those people can make mistakes, and I think we can all acknowledge that people make mistakes sometimes, right? Why would you be in favor of allowing them to kill themselves if the people that they're going to make that determination
Again,
could
I've
be
already
making
made
mistakes?
this argument, and we're circling back, right?
We're circling back
There's
because
a
it
difference
seems like you're
between.
contradicting yourself.
I'm not contradicting myself. It's very simple. There's a massive difference between the state that has taken away people's civil liberties and put them in a torturous position, and the difficulties and the conundrums with that, and people that are presumably out and free, and their liberty and their choices. Pardon me. Too much egg drop soup.
Okay, so you think somebody has the ability to make the determination with somebody who's like out in the wild feeling depressed and wanting to kill themselves. But if somebody who is like forcibly in a cage because they've killed people or whatever, you think that's too far, right? That's a bridge too far.
Yes.
Why do you think
What?
that?
I don't know how many times we have to circle around this, man.
I just
Like,
don't
I mean, like,
get
we're
how
circling the
it's
drain,
like
like-
you're pro whatever the state like decides, as long as it's not killing the prisoner. So you're okay with the state
What?
like it's kind of like what it's coming across as to me.
No, like I said, like I'm staying within the bounds of the conversation and with what we can do currently and whether or not it would support this policy change, right? We're not talking about what I support. Like I said, I don't support involuntary prisons,
Okay,
but that's
maybe
a whole nother fucking
okay.
beast.
I'm gonna ask for help. Okay, Destiny, you have like 2 IQ points more than I do, right? So like, is there something here that I'm missing?
No, I mean, I think we have just a fundamental divide that we can't bridge, you know?
But would you agree that there's like a contradiction there, or am I like imagining that? Because I feel like I don't know why there'd be like this. As soon as this person is forcibly in a cage, right? Suddenly we're too far for somebody to make a determination as to whether or not they're a sound mind. Like do prisoners just not have the ability to consent to anything because they're under duress?
Well, is that the case, Scott? Can prisoners not consent to anything?
What do you mean by consent to anything? Can they not consent to a choice between fucking whether or not they want the cornbread or whether or not they want the brownie? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, sometimes these people have like a conjugal visits, right? Where somebody will come and have sex with them. So given that this person is under duress, they're stuck in a situation where they have no access to the opposite sex, and somebody pops up who wants to have sex with them, right? They might not actually want to have sex with this person, right? But they're forced to, because it's their only option, right? So do they really have consent in that situation?
I don't even know.
If the other option is having like blue balls for the rest of your life, or jerking off your cellmate or whatever.
So you're saying people can't sexually consent in prison?
I think they can. You're saying that they
I
can't consent to like end their life. So what else can they consent to? Under duress.
It's an interesting question psychologically that I think would actually require research to better understand. That's my answer. And like, I honestly think you might actually have to research that. Like, I think that's actually an interesting thing for sex researchers to look into, is the ability of people to psychologically consent under the trauma of prison.
I weirdly agree with Doobie's take here in the sense that I don't know that there is a meaningful difference in ability to consent under duress, regardless of where the duress is coming from. Whether it is literally pathological, like your body is attacking you, whether it is the state enforcing some sort of punishment against you. All of these situations of duress, I feel like, are equivalent and monkey with our traditional conceptions of free and informed consent in some way. I think that's a fair intuition.
Yeah, I think if it is like they can't consent, it's like some form of rape. Like I might need to have different plans for this weekend because that'd be kind of fucked. Like I just don't
I
understand.
don't
Like
want to rape anybody.
Yeah, I
shit.
just-
Doobie wants
want-
life in prison because he
Yeah,
has
I'm sorry.
conjugal
I
visit
mean, I'm
scheduled.
sorry. I'm sorry that you asked an interesting question and you demanded that
I forgive
someone
you.
like plant their flag in the hill, but like that is an actually interesting question that I feel like would actually require better research to understand. I can't answer whether or not. Now, obviously, there's certain things you obviously can't consent to, right? You know what I mean? Like a female prisoner in a guard situation is a little different than like their husband. You know what I mean? Like these are two different ends of the spectrum here.
So,
But I mean, it would be interesting to see.
okay.